Hey everybody. Obviously for anyone who saw the video that I put up yesterday, I was wrong about the headline, wrong about the big picture. Um, I think I was right about some of the underlying things. I think I was right about those big metrics. I think it just turned out there were other factors that um, I underestimated or missed, or whatever characterization you think is most accurate. I am gonna do a longer video later with a proper post-mortem that goes into more detail about what I think the Democratic Party did wrong to get us to this point. And just to be clear, that is not going to be focused on a critique of Harris, because even though she was not my preferred candidate, and even though there are probably some things, hindsight being 2020, that we could say she could have done differently, I think given the conditions that we were in and the timeline that she ran what was as close to a flawless race as she could have. I think that the main mistakes were made before she was ever in the driver's seat, largely by Biden, but also by Clinton and Obama to some extent, but just the Democratic Party establishment overall, who have, since the Clinton years, employed a strategy of running to the middle and ignoring the base entirely. That has come up most recently as a fight between the people who wanted a ceasefire in Gaza and the people who wanted to beat Trump. And I talked in that video that I made earlier in the summer about how this is a strategy that Democrats have used for a long time, and the thing that kept coming up in the primary in 2024, not 2024 because we didn't have one, 2020 and in 2022, was a split between people who supported candidates who would be broadly described as progressives, people who supported candidates who were broadly described as centrists, and the ones who were more likely to support a progressive candidate were more likely to say that the most important thing to them was that the candidate support progressive policy positions, whereas the people who supported the more centrist candidates, they just wanted to beat Trump. They had a sort of sense of who was most electable, which I have referred to at times in the past as electability vibes, which is a very hard to quantify and even qualify thing, because it's just the way people feel about something. And I think that's the kind of consideration, electability, where someone is most likely to be influenced by either sexism or racism, if that's going to be a factor for them. Either they're openly embracing their sexism and racism, in which case they're far more likely to be not Democrats anyway, or it's subconscious and without realizing themselves possibly, it'll just be part of this matrix of electability, which will come down to the vibes they get from the person. Anyway, so it seemed to me, even in 2020 and again in 2022, that in addition to the long history of Democrats employing this strategy and having it be a really bad idea for a variety of reasons, it was particularly stupid to cater to the people who just wanted to beat Trump, since they just wanted a warm body. They were voting not Trump. If the people who were not picky were the ones you were going to cater to, you're obviously going to end up ignoring all the people who had a more specific request, which seems like a really stupid idea. But when you've controlled the party for decades, I guess it's a lot easier to ignore all the people who have specific requests. When in the past people have requests and you've accused them of misogyny instead of listening to them and their complaints about what the prospective candidate did with their votes as a senator or actions they took as Secretary of State, it's much easier to just say, oh, you don't like her because of things her husband did, which is unfair, of course, or you don't like her because of misogyny, which is unfair, of course, or, you don't like her because of conspiracy theories or whatever. There were a whole bunch of things that were thrown at people who criticized Clinton, and it just, for a lot of people, turned into, this standard tribalistic kind of conflict. But the seeds of the genuine, deep-rooted problem that the Democrats have had this entire time with Trump are in that conflict in the party, and it's, again, borne out in those poll results that you saw from the primary of 2020 and in 2022 in various races. And of course, after doing what they did in 2016, which for the record was, Clinton paying off the multi-million-dollar debt of the DNC, installing Clinton loyalists there so as to set the whole party strategy, and engaging in all kinds of dirty tricks that they usually criticize Republicans for engaging in, like purging voters. I ended up being one of them. So in the case of New York, they went around the state and purged between 200 and 300,000 voters from the most progressive parts of the state, so as to give Hillary Clinton the electorate that would prefer her on Election Day. And of course, even though it was obvious immediately that there had been major shenanigans in this purge, Bernie didn't want her to be tainted going into the general if she ended up being the nominee. So he backed off. But that's the kind of thing that she did in 2016, and it should have been evident to them that having to do those kinds of things means that you're not the preference of the voters. And even if the things the voters don't like about you are not fair, elections are popularity contests, pointing to the people who are saying unfair things in order to not have to listen to the people who are saying fair things is not something that someone would do if they actually are more concerned about the integrity of the party and addressing the concerns of the voters than they are about their own career trajectory, which is obviously what was going on with Hillary in 2016. And then we've seen it with the undeclared movement, or unaffiliated. I can't remember what the word is because I've been up for too many hours. It's like an all-nighter and then like 2 hours of sleep and then otherwise an all-nighter. It's just going on 48 hours. But it was the Gaza ceasefire people, and personally I completely understand where they're coming from. I have the same position they have, and I could never ask somebody who feels strongly about that to have voted for a candidate that they felt was complicit in genocide. And even though I think Harris could have pushed back much stronger on it, and I think she probably would have been better off in the results if she had, at the same time, she was the vice president, and I think most of the problem was Biden as far as the way they were dealing with Netanyahu. Obviously, Netanyahu is the MVP of the Trump campaign. I think there's going to end up having been Logan Act violations at the very least. Not to mention, the disinformation has been so out of control. Even though I was well aware of the amount of disinformation, I genuinely thought that given the demographic shifts in the electorate, that enough people would recognize disinformation, and they would recognize the fact that even if, Harris was not their favorite candidate in 2020, or if they had qualms with the Democrats, and, any generic Democrat was not who they wanted in the White House, that it would be better to have a less than perfect Democrat, even a status quo Democrat like Biden, hypothetically, than it would be to have someone like Trump who, even if, as we said, half of what he was saying was bullshit, and it was just, maybe going to happen, maybe not. Which half? Is it going to be the half that sounds like a good idea, but it's backed up by nothing? Is it going to be the half that's accusations of criminality by his opponents, or, projection based on his own track record? Or is it going to be connected to reality? That's the part that bothers me. I thought more Americans could see the difference between reality and fiction, talking points, and virtue signaling versus facts. It really seems like the disinformation and the overall effect of Fox News has been much greater than I would have thought it was going to be. That's my guess. Anyway, we'll find out. It's always possible that there's some other element to this, and that there is something that's wrong about the count, but as I believe I said in this video, the fact that the discrepancy between Harris and the congressional candidates is so consistent across states and counties, I think it's unlikely to be wrong as far as the count and the vote. I'm guessing that these are legitimate votes that were cast. The thing I don't think is legitimate is the fact that every Trump supporter you talk to, if they give you something they like about Trump, it's something that's not actually real, like the economy, or which was Obama's economy, or his plans for the next time, which are going to crash the economy if he's allowed to do them. Or if it's something that they don't like about the Democrats, it's like that they're, transing kids in school, which obviously isn't happening. It's just remarkable the degree to which misinformation has swayed this election. And I really hope that people in Gaza and people in Ukraine can hang on while the good Americans here try to make the ones who were fooled by Trump realize that they've made a mistake, and hopefully they'll realize that the uniparty and the deep state that they have a problem with, if there's anybody who represents the uniparty and the deep state, it's Trump's co-conspirators in Congress. So we have an opportunity here to rebuild, and as far as political and electoral politics goes, in the meantime, I would say on an individual level, we really need to be preparing for the time when the food supply chain is collapsing because of climate change. I think there's very little doubt that the timeline we're on, as far as either extreme weather, alterations to the overall climate, the ice caps going into the ocean and changing the sea levels in a drastic way that takes out a bunch of people, any of these hypothetical climate catastrophes, that timeline is likely to speed up now. So you need to be coming up with alternative systems for when this system collapses. I've never been a proponent of trying to collapse the system because I think it's going to collapse itself. I am a proponent of people building their own systems and mutual aid and getting the physical infrastructure together. What you really need is a community beyond anything else. So that's something we can all work on, whether we have a lot of resources or not. Take comfort in your friends and start planning for how we're going to organize for tomorrow. I guess I would say the only other thing that I would want to include before I get to the other video I'll do after I've slept a little bit is that I was focused on reform and organizing and ground up people-powered solutions even before this, even when I thought Harris was going to win. That's still going to be my approach. Personally, I think I probably have enough privilege to keep me safe as an individual. I will mourn for every person for whom that is not true, and it will be like a dagger in my heart to watch my fellow citizens and co-organizers and people that I could, make revolutionary and positive changes with be affected in ways that I think I won't be, but I will use my privilege to fight what I think is going to come. And I'm sorry that I think there's going to be a point where I'm going to have to say I told you so to the Trump supporters who say he's joking, who say his economy was good, who say it's all the fault of the Democrats. when it's all PR, it's easy to make things up and have it sound good, but when you actually have to run the government and the economy actually relies on you, and the regulatory apparatus that provides, you know, meat and milk inspections and all the health and safety rules, and make sure that if there are OSHA violations that, you know, we get some fairness and some justice. Once all that's being run by Elon Musk, I'm afraid that there are going to be a lot of Trump supporters who realize that, you know, maybe having people in charge of the government who, as a matter of philosophy, say government is inherently corrupt and cannot work is not a good idea. Maybe having people in charge of the government who thinks it's possible to use the government to address the needs of the people would be better, even if they make mistakes, even if there are flaws in the system. But you know what? That's just me. So anyway, do something fun, hug your friends and family, and get some rest and get to organizing.